This is Louis Shupe, Professor Emeritus from the Department of Communication at Wright State University. Today is March 31st, 2011, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Elizabeth Harden, Professor Emeritus from the Department of English, as part of the Wright State University Retiree Association's Oral History Project. Dr. Harden, may I call you Liz?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Being interviewed today. And could you start off by telling us a bit of your background, where you came from, what your previous experience was, and just introduce yourself to us.
Thank you very much. I can even go back to childhood if you want me to go back that far. But let me just say that I was reared on a small farm, south central Kentucky. It was a lovely area, you know, near that Wolf Creek Lake and Dam there. Went to grade school and high school there, graduated valedictorian, and did my undergraduate work at Western Kentucky University. Those are 4 of my happiest years. I loved Western Kentucky. I became a member of their debate team, debate squad, won all sorts of honors, if I may say so, including one international speech contest. But it was just a remarkable, going from the little pigtail girl, you know, from the farm to a cosmopolitan university, which Western was then. So I told my mother, I said, I want to go to graduate school. I don't want to teach in high school here. And she said, well, tell me more about it. So a nice assistantship came through. I just grabbed it when it first came through from the University of Arkansas. And in order to get accepted, you know, financially, I worked in Louisville that summer with an interstate finance office, if you can imagine an English major in a finance office. But it worked out just fine. And then I started my attendance working on the master's 1,000 miles from home at the University of Arkansas. I liked it immediately there. The folks, of course, many of the students at least, came from all over parts of the South. And you'd hear these different Southern accents, you know. One would be from Mississippi, and one would be from maybe Alabama, or maybe somebody from Georgia.
Speaking of that, what is their mascot that they're
Oh,
considered?
goodness.
Is it the Hogs?
It's the Hogs.
Okay.
Thank you very much. See how memory is elusive.
When you were talking about the dialects.
Oh, when we would beat, you know, certain teams, we'd call Hogs nearly all night. Go down to George's, which was our hangout, you know, where we had our beer and crumpets and whatever. But any rate, the masters went well. I took a position then at Southwest Missouri State in Springfield. Now, these are little hop-around positions. Really, you're getting enough to pay back your debts and to go back to graduate school. So I was there for a year, went back to the University of Arkansas, stayed, I believe it was 2 years, and then I took a position at Murray State University in Kentucky. And there are good things about these rather unknown universities because you can get certain things accomplished. For example, I passed my German while I was teaching at Murray. The professor at Arkansas allowed us to do that, you know, so I took his class and was able to get the German the first time. Something similar to that happened with French, and but those were very difficult things to pass at Arkansas. They were hurdles that I know one family were staying just so that the husband could pass the languages. But to get on along with the career, I taught then at Northeastern in Oklahoma, and I stayed there 2 years because it was very close to the University of Arkansas. And I did not want to lose my professor. I'd had 5 classes under him. He directed my dissertation, but he would be leaving for Auburn the next year. So I stayed on Northeastern the second year and was able to finish up my comprehensives, and he directed my dissertation. So I said, if I got to that point of finishing all of my work, I would attend the commencement. You know, a lot of students, when they get through that, they say, oh, I don't know, I'm going to the commencement. I went back to the commencement, Only one of my professors was there. But I was a very proud lady. And I remember calling Mother that evening and saying, "Mom, I'm now Dr. McWhorter." Well, she said, "I knew you were quite smart, sweetie." And she said, "I'm awfully proud of you." So that kind of gets me to that stage. I'd be happy to talk about Wright State if you want.
Well, what I'd like to ask you now is, when and how did you first hear of Wright State University?
I'll tell you how. I actually applied at our sister school, Miami. And Miami, I think, was sending most of us over here to this new young university just getting started eventually.
When was that? What year, can you remember?
It would have been around 66, I guess.
Okay.
It would have been, yes. So I came over, or actually I interviewed with Peter Brocker in New York at the MLA. And he said, "Why are you leaving Wichita," which was the last university I had taught at. And I said, "Well, he's stressing only the new criticism." To which Peter, Dr. Brocker said, laughingly, "What's that?" As though he didn't know the new criticism, you know. But all those schools I've mentioned provided varying experiences in terms of the chairs of the department and the way they handled programs and whatever. So when I came here, I felt like I was an elder already, you know, having had that experience, teaching experience.
And was that 1966?
It would have been 66 when I came here.
When you came to Wright State?
Wright State.
Okay.
Yes. There were two buildings, as I recall. Millett was established there. I believe Allen was the first building, and then Millett. And having been in those established schools, of course I would love to give you my impression of Wright State.
That's the question I want to ask. What was your impression of Wright State?
A cornfield with crows, two buildings, one not quite yet finished. Enormous enthusiasm among all of us youngsters then. You know, we were young back then. There was a wonderful cooperation from the community, very much in favor. You know, the big fundraiser they had, I'll call it that. Half of that money would go to the University of Dayton for a new student center, and half of it would come to us to start the kernel of what would hopefully become a new university. So I found it very refreshing to look out to those cornfields and see the squirrels and crows and whatever.
So you were excited by that?
I was excited.
Okay.
I was. There was a freshness about a new school that I had not been able to observe before. And coming here almost as a senior professor, you know, I just enjoyed the youth and the enthusiasm and the committed. We were committed. So many of those early years we were working, as you know, on programs and trying to get our curricula straightened out and getting administrators placed in the right positions and teachers at the right, you know, level.
Who were some of the people with whom you worked at that time? Do you remember?
Well, in one way, I worked with Brage Golding, but only from the English department, you know. I mean, I interviewed and would report back to him a little bit of that sort of thing. Larry Hussman was chosen by the department to be the first chair, and Dr. Golding just didn't quite think Larry fit the pigeonhole there, and appointed Dr. Brocker as the acting deputy chairman. He thought of us as a group of young people who weren't quite dry behind the ears, you know. But I always thought Golding was a good speaker and had a good voice and meant well, I think. He had an interesting sense of humor, you know. We've had the presidents back, as you know, several times. And the last time I think Dr. Golding was back, I shook hands with him, and I said that I was so sorry I'd heard his wife had passed away, and I'm so sorry. Well, he said, I am too. You know? But he had a lady friend with him, so I think everything was fine. You can strike that if you wish.
No, that's fine. I think that's part of the story.
Right.
Who was dean of the college at that time? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. It's going to take me a minute or two.
Well, that's okay. When it comes back to you,
it'll come
just
back.
tell me.
Okay.
Yeah. What were some of the courses you taught?
Well, of course, we all taught freshman English in that time. You'll be interested in this, that I was hired to be the romantic specialist. And so, you know, that's just my cup of tea. I still get teary-eyed over John Keats and William Wordsworth. I've told my colleagues about, you know, my husband and I did a lot of traveling in Europe, and I'd always ask him to go to the literary homes. And so the day we visited Keats' grave, it was lunchtime, and the guy said, no, we can't let you in. I said, oh, sir, I said I must come in, because I'm a professor, and I'm expected to show slides and talk to my students. Well, I went to Keats' grave, and I knelt down, and tears rolled down my eyes. I teach with a great deal of passion, and this group of poets, you know, they lend themselves to passion.
You know, you're legendary for having a classroom experience that is romantic. Could you just give us a picture of one of your romantic lectures in the classroom?
Well, one of the students love the passion that I have, and it's very real. I mean, I feel that about these poems. In fact, at my late husband's mausoleum program, I read from the romantic poets. Mm-hmm. And I think that, for example, teaching a class in Keats, you must teach the Eve of St. Agnes. Mm-hmm. And I could tell that the students weren't getting into the narrative. So I played old Angela, you know, the old nurse who lets Porphyro into St. Agnes' room. The date was January 22nd of each year. It's the coldest night of the year. It's St. Agnes' Eve. So they're from warring families. And Angela was the old nurse who let Porphyro into St. Agnes' room. I mean, she was a virgin. I mean, obviously something is going on there when he gets into the room. But she's warning him that they are warring families. So I mimic her.
Mercy, Porphyro, hie thee from this place. They're all here tonight, the whole bloodthirsty race. Get hence, get hence. There's dwarf is Hildebrand. He had a fever laden in his mind. He cursed both the and time.
And so they just, you can hear a pin drop.
I remember, I think, walking by one time your classroom, and I saw a lighted candle in the room.
We were doing Samuel Taylor Coleridge. It was a night class, and the students themselves had decided that we must have some candles, you know, Coleridge and the metaphysical part of his work and the supernatural. So here we were all gathered around this table. The students just kind of took over the class, and they'd done papers, and you know, they did a little bit of mimicking, you know. Oh, tell me, sweet Christabel, you know. But no, I guess I really feel that strongly about the whole 19th century, actually. Robert Browning is fun to teach, I mean, but he's not a William Wordsworth, you know.
Now, what were some of the events that were happening on campus that you remember? That were either national or worldwide or just local?
I should remember. They're in my notes. Mm-hmm.
Did anything strike you and that kind of led you to some of the things that the faculty at that time had to deal with?
Kent State, of course, you know, made national headlines. Mm-hmm. We were getting into that era of history, I think. Student protests, and that would have been which war?
That would have been following Vietnam War, I would
The
think.
Vietnam War, that was part of it. Women's liberation was taking root. And it was just a time of investing my word in, you know, things were not settled. I mean, there were lots of protests and a lot of disagreements about things. And I have in my notes a lot of things, but you told me not to use them. But there were a lot of national things.
Tell us about what the students were like at that time.
Very disciplined. You'd think that's a strange word to use for the 60s, right? But generally, remember, we were in a different situation because we're starting a new university. About 3,200 students, according to what my memory, that first year. And as you know, most of our students did anyway work outside jobs to be able to attend Wright State. So they were fairly serious-minded students. And kind of reminded me of my own student days, you know, which weren't all that far away from those early 60s. But at any rate, I thought of them as being... We gave a lot of our time to students in conferences in those days. And I think that was very useful. They could see we were serious, you know. So that's the way that I remember the students. And even today, I still get an email once in a while from a former student.
That's nice
Uh-huh.
to remember those. Where was your office?
It was right across from the English department office, right there in the hall. Straight across in Millette.
In Millette.
Right. You know, I didn't take the rest of my story because I've done a lot of administrative work here. Starting out, always the bridesmaid, but never the bride. I was Thomas Wetmore's assistant chair and director of freshman English. I frankly did most of the work. But, you know, I didn't mind. I mean, I felt that we were moving forward and I wanted to be a part of this huge drama. And even from that early point, we had a good department, you know. People worked well together. Then I went on to be assistant associate dean in the College of Liberal Arts over curriculum and scheduling. And the chairs were always coming into my office because we were working on course descriptions. And, you know, folks like, who was the guy in art? He's wonderful in art, but not so much in English composition. So he had this white ink all dropping off of his paper where he tried to revise some of his language, you know. But at any rate then, that was an interesting experience. I got to know the chairs, you know, the departments quite well. Then I went from there to the wing.
Let me come back to the college. Which dean did you work with when you were the assistant?
Cantaloupe.
Oh, Cantaloupe. When did you start working with Dean Cantaloupe?
I can tell you in just a moment. 68, 69, 69, 70.
So you came here before he did? Or was
About
he...
the same time, I'd say.
About the same time.
Dr. Spiegel had known him in a university in New York, and I think had recommended him highly, so.
Okay. Now I interrupted you on your history of your service to the university.
Oh, I went on over to the wing. Executive Director of General University Services. I had all of the non-academic services under me, including food service and the bookstore. And I had Don Bell, remember him? And his friend who was over to the traffic area. But I must say that I had, as my staff, all men, except for one person, and that was the Mrs. O'Brien. And so she wanted to report to the president, so that was carried out so that she could do that. But I just want to say that I have the most pleasant memories about my administrative experience over there in terms of my staff. But we hadn't gotten a lot of the wrinkles straightened out about who reported to whom. And some of the men, I think, we've all had to grow. That's the point I really want to make. We've had to grow intellectually, administratively. We've had to grow with the community. Men reporting to women or women reporting to men, or however it should work out. And I think we almost have that problem solved. Maybe not nationally. It wasn't solved at the point that I was in Dwayne.
You mentioned wrinkles. Can you remember a few other wrinkles? That's like...
You mean little byways that didn't quite go right? Other than things, well, I mean, I have so much of this stuff I could write a book about it. But there were problems with one of the administrators. I didn't know if I were able to talk about this or not. But one of them was voted no confidence, if you remember.
We don't need the name.
Okay.
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 If you did write the book, what would be the title? You said I could write a book about that.
I haven't quite figured it out yet.
There we go. If I ask you, could you recreate that song about the wing? You know what I'm leading
I don't
to?
remember all of it by any means, but I could do one or two verses.
Do.
Okay.
Just at least a start to it.
Tom Whissen, by the way, wrote the words, and what's his name, who was very well known in music, accompanied me on. You were there that day, weren't you?
I was there.
All I want is a room somewhere. Does the wing have a suite to spare? With one big swivel chair. Wouldn't it be lovely? Lots of flunkies for me to fire. Lots of stoolies for me to hire. More power to this old briar. Now wouldn't it be lovely? Oh, how lovely being everybody's. I don't remember. Full respect. But that's the way it went. I still have the lyrics to that.
Okay, good. What were the responses from some of the people about
Well, I
it?
mean, they seemed to enjoy it enormously. They got almost a standing ovation.
I remember having been there, you know. Let's come back to the students. Okay. You started to talk that they were really attentive. How did they compare to the other students you have worked with in the past at other institutions? Can you make any comparison?
I think that I can say that they were differently motivated because 9/10 of them had outside jobs, and some of them were married with families, you know, and that. But well, I'm going to make this statement that matures a student in a different way than just an 18-year-old, you know, or a 20-year-old just not having had much challenge that way. You all won't believe it, but I have a cardboard box that large, and guess what's in it? It's full of my finest student papers.
Your students from here?
From here. And I could not bring myself to throw those. I just couldn't. Because some of them were actually working at a graduate level. By the way, do you remember that many of our classes could be taken for graduate and undergraduate
I remember
credit?
that.
And some of those graduate students were about as good as any that you'll find anywhere. Really and truly.
So these were students in the late 60s, early 70s?
Yes, that's right.
And you still have those papers?
I still have the papers.
That might be interesting to see if some of those are archival.
That's it. I'm sure that some of them would be. See, you'll have to educate me because I don't know what's available to me. I don't come up to come up. I ought to do that.
But see, those reflect the memories of what we're trying to discover in the oral history.
Okay. There would be a lot of interesting things in those papers. By the way, let me give you one of a freshman student, and I will never forget that student. You know, those little old topics you give like in a summer session to freshman English students. And you gave simple topics like, it's a definition theme actually, what is a successful person? And this student said, so what if you don't want to be successful? What if you want to be unsuccessful? And I tell you, I laughed till tears rolled down. 'Cause he was telling you how to slight your work and to miss classes and don't ever open a book and all, you know. And but it really was well done. I think the paper got an A. Because it was a point of view that, you know, was realistic. Isn't that a nice little turn there
That is.
on the assignment?
Well, see, if I remember, you had the reputation of being a very strict or a good teacher.
Yeah. Yes.
So you held high standards.
Yes.
Okay.
I was taught that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it pains me to see a dangling participle or a misspelled word. I almost have to leave the room.
What do you think about split infinitives?
Oh, and dangling modifiers.
Initially, when you came to Wright State, how long did you anticipate you would stay here?
Well, you know, I came as a newlywed. I forgot to tell you that.
Okay.
Dennis and I had just married that summer. I had finished a PhD. I had gone with this girlfriend and her two stepdaughters to Europe. Okay. Visited some of the literary homes then with her. And she was kind of an art person and wanted to see Beatrice Potter and things like that, you know. But I got back and doctorate finished. I had a contract for a book. And I had taken the job at Wright State. Mm-hmm. Would you like to hear this little scenario about how I met my husband?
Well, yeah, I'll come back to that.
Okay.
Continue with your coming to Wright State.
Well, I hadn't thought, yes, I already had the job here, so my late husband said that he'd be willing to move. He was with household finance and would be willing to move into this area. Mm-hmm. They moved him to Cincinnati and came on over then. We had an apartment over in Woodman Park Apartments.
Mm-hmm. Why did you stay as long as you have at Wright State?
Well, I think you have to look ahead. There are certain games that have to be played, but I'm going to phrase that differently. There's a certain kind of discipline that you have to follow if you want to get to the top. Now, the top in academia means that you're a full professor with tenure. Mm-hmm. Okay? You might remember that I was the first female full professor in the English department and in the College of Liberal Arts. Mm-hmm. But it was because I had all these things coming in. I have even tutored young women. A couple or three have come to me, you know, as kind of a mentor. Dr. Harden, what do I have to do to get ahead? And I said, it's written out for you very plainly. Teaching, scholarship, and service. But I said you can't be mediocre, you know. Particularly in your service, you have to show leadership ability, you know. But, you know, an interesting thing about Wright State, you could work your heart out here in service, which I really did. I still have my heart. What about outside service? Well, I said I've traveled 41 countries. And I said I've brought back slides, I've written papers about them, and I've worked with them in class, what I've seen, to let them have visions of these poems at the poets' homes and things. To me, that's outside service. Mm-hmm. I think they were finally convinced.
If I say the name Elvis Presley, do you react?
Oh, yes. I'm ready to get on my dancing shoes. Do my twist and probably get you up on the floor with me if you would accept my invitation.
Do you know why I asked you about that?
You knew that I liked Elvis?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was the Elvis era, you know, that many of us lived through, including mm-hmm. you. Mm-hmm. But there was something magnetic about that guy that I just adored him. And somebody, you know, who's that down to earth and yet that talented. You forgive him for a lot of his sins, you know, so we don't worry about sins. We're left listening to the music.
Mm-hmm. Let me come back to just the early days. If you could describe Wright State with one word, what would it be at that time?
Let me think about that just a moment.
Okay.
I'm thinking probably improperly. about the stages in life. For example, we went through the childhood, and that would have been the childhood when we had the first building and the two buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Then as we began to grow and to get our programs together and to get our faculty hired and administrators in place, that's adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we really grow and we are becoming now a nationally known university, I would love to tell you this little story about basketball, but now I'll wait for you to ask me.
But give me one word before you tell me about basketball.
I can't, it's something so simple as childhood.
Okay, that's fine.
And then adolescence, and then maturity.
Okay. Almost Shakespearean.
Uh-huh.
You know, the ages of man.
Right.
Good. Now basketball.
Okay. My late husband was always, he loved basketball more than he loved to eat, I think, when hungry. Coming from Kentucky, it didn't take much persuasion for me. So we, at one point in our lives, several years, we attended every game over in the old gym, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that old place shook. I mean, we were so in, that place was packed. And you could feel the rafters almost, you know, shaking with the enthusiasm of the crowd. But as president of the faculty, and I'm proud of that, I think of that position more than any other one, I wanted to do things. I wanted us to accomplish things. And you know, the faculty cooperated with me beautifully. They really, truly did. And I was reading over some of my notes from the steering committee the other evening, just for entertainment. Every committee had been there, you know, at the last meeting and had their reports already and everything, just like a group of good students. But I argued with them about going Division I. Remember Jim Jacob and Charles Hartman?
Mm-hmm.
They had not been able to get it through the faculty. And
Who did you follow as president?
Jim Jacob.
Jim Jacob, okay.
Jim would he was still in the age, I think, of adolescence. He told Emil Comedic once in a steering committee meeting, "Now, Emil, now you put that cigarette out, you hear me? You put that out." And Emil, you know how he actually was chewing on a cigar, I think. But, you know, what is the term that I want when you work for something? I went around and knocked doors.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the School of Medicine, I went to the School of Professional Psychology, the School of Nursing. They let me make a speech over at the School of Nursing. I wanted that so much for the
Now you're talking about
basketball going Division I.
Okay.
Because we can have all the books in the library we want, but we most likely will not become a nationally known institution unless we have one heck of a good, I should say, intercollegiate athletics program,
Mm-hmm.
which takes in the 12 or 14 sports, you know.
Now, were you saying that you were the one instrumental in motivating Division I?
I would say absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How?
Ask
What
Cusack.
did you do?
Ask Cusack and see what he thinks about it. Once in a while he'll tell you the truth.
No, you tell us about what he would say.
He would be limited in his vocabulary in terms of what he would say. I think, though, it's hard to talk about yourself, although I'm just going on and on.
You're doing very well.
I provided the kind of leadership that impressed people. And I didn't have a lot of difficulty getting faculty, asking them to be on this committee or to do this or that. The Dean of Medicine, I thought I'd never forget his name, the Dean. He ran for the presidency, by the way, and didn't get it. Dean Belgian.
Mm-hmm.
Made a special trip back from a meeting in Columbus to speak to and to vote on Division I. Now that's the kind of influence I think that I had anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the finest things we've ever done.
When did we do that? What year? Do you remember?
Let's see, I would have been president in 84, 85. It had been around 1987.
Then we went Division I.
Approximately, yeah.
Hmm.
We were first, well actually, let me think about it just a minute. We were in Division II already. That's the way it was, and we wanted, we had a lot of fine games in Division II. A lot of fine opponents and whatever. But it's one of the big things that brings us together. By the way, an offshoot of going Division I was the creation of the Alma Mater. And I chaired that committee. And we had about 5 people on it. Alma Maters can be heavenly and beautiful, or they can be among the worst written lyrics in existence.
Tell us how that came out, and
Well,
by whom?
They were going to vote on the Whisson Garrison. They were going to go for that. It obviously was the best of those submitted. But Charles Berry, I don't think Charles would mind my saying this, he was standing up for principles. He said he thought an alma mater should be a lyric poem, and that this one was too pedestrian. I wanted to see that one through, so I met Garrison in the hall one day, and I said, if we change just a few words. He said no, that he'd spent many, many hours on that, and he refused to budge. I saw him in the fitness center the other day. I said, did you know that you were famous? And he just laughed. I said, we sing it at the end of every basketball game, so everybody knows at least the first verse. But anyway, that was a fun talk, to go back. He said, how old are you? I said, wow.
He asked you that?
I said, 39. Well, he says, I'm 66. Well, I said, you don't look bad for your age. See, this is the relationship I had with faculty. And we had, just right now, I've been hugging everybody in the English department.
You have? What
Yeah.
about other departments?
Well, I hadn't made my rounds yet. I guess I'd have to knock on doors to get in there. Have you seen any nice unattached men that I could go knock their doors?
Well,
you can take that one out.
We'll look out for that. We'll look out for that. Okay. What other topics would you like to discuss briefly about your experiences at Wright State?
Those who are in faculty governance would enjoy remembering the roasts.
Mm-hmm.
Because as each, we went from vice president, Mulholland didn't care what it was called, so we immediately made it retroactive. So all of us were president of the faculty. It makes sense, I think, more for some than others, but anyway. Let's say that, for example, Jim Hughes was roasted. I was always the speaker that got up because I always put a lot into it. And so I started off with a quote with him from, it was serious and polished, a quote from Virginia Woolf about knowing the outline but not the content. It was, how Woolf could write beautifully. And I worked it in to bring in all of Jim's teaching awards. You read Virginia Woolf and then you say, Dr. Jim Hughes was the first to win the Robert J. Kegaris Teaching Award for Excellence. And then you go back to the Woolf and bring your voice down a little bit. Just perfect lines out of To the Lighthouse. And but now those roasts were fun. They weren't all equally eligible for fine prose.
I remember your roast.
Oh my goodness!
I would prefer that we don't say some of those things that were done there. Okay. How did the Over the Hill Gang concept develop? Do you remember?
I'm not following you.
The past presidents were known as Over the Hill.
Oh.
How did that originate?
I don't know, but let me give you another little anecdote. I have it in my notes. I was entertained by my own notes the other evening.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh my God, did I do all of that, But it was after the last faculty meeting, which had gone beautifully. Every issue in the program passed. Ferrari came up and, I've got all kinds of lovely notes from presidents, on things that I've done. But I was just waiting for someone to. Hartman and Jacob never wanted to walk with me. So I just held my head up a little bit higher, and I ran into them one day, and I said, I'm going to win this. I'm going to win the presidency. Jacob said, how do you know? I said, I just know people's reactions to me, But the point is, somebody came along and said, waiting for your hearse? I said, no, sir, waiting for Godot. Faculty can be pretty rancid sometimes if they want to be.
See, now you're talking about government, this faculty government.
That is true.
Right.
That is true. I'm sorry, I do get excited.
No, that's fine.
Did you want to do more with teaching, or?
No. Well, what would you like to tell us further about teaching?
Well, one thing I noticed in The Guardian, which is relatively related, is that the Nexus is coming back, the literary magazine. And I thought that did a nice service for the students. It gave them a mouthpiece for all kinds of things, even if they were criticizing. They generally did it in a mannerly way, But I'm glad to see that. And they're inviting faculty to submit essays too, if we'd like,
Did you have any involvement with student activities? Like the getting Nexus started?
Not in that sense. I got 2 student awards, though, believe me, for service, which I thought I was very honored to get those. You go along and you work hard and you don't know that anybody is noticing,
That things have changed then since you came here.
Yes.
What's your impression of some of the changes that have come about?
Well, I haven't, unfortunately, been deeply involved in the activities of the university since I took the retirement. There's so many things. We could do retirement as another one, but we won't. But the thing about it is that your time will be taken up one way or the other when you take the retirement. You're not on this heavy schedule, but you stay busy and involved anyway. I'd have to speak sort of as an outsider, to tell you quite honestly. It seems that we are, again, increasing or expanding programs. I think that the international scene is changing, that it's being more highly supported by the administration. I think that's great. I think it's wonderful when students get a chance to travel wherever they want to go, And in that sense, I think there's change.
Before we get too far away from the literary magazine, do you have any remembrances of the paper, the student paper, when that
Yes,
first
I do.
emerged?
I do.
How did that originate?
Golly, we're really going back now to the faculty. It was the faculty member who taught creative writing, whose name I'm going to forget right now, who started that magazine, as I recall. And I thought it was a fairly good quality,
Do you remember the Mad River Review?
I do.
Would you tell us about that?
Well, again, it's been so long. I can remember the face of the guy who started that. Isn't that amazing? Is this the face that launched 1,000 ships? And then I had a professor at Arkansas who did a little parody of that, or is this the pace that helped 1,000 hips?
Would you repeat that?
Is this the pace that helped 1,000 hips?
I got it, but I think that was well worth repeating.
Oh.
Okay.
But you're asking some very good questions. I hadn't. I'm sure if I had reviewed, I would have a better memory of it. But I just remember that it succeeded, and then, as in each case, it kind of dropped off,
No, see, the important thing is how you're recalling some of these events is exactly what we want.
Okay. Okay,
That's
great.
great.
But I remember that they were an advantage. They were an extra extension of the English department, what it was doing. And I would very much, heck, I might even write something for it myself if they invite faculty, And some of our remembrances might be kind of interesting.
That would be nice.
Right?
What is the most exciting thing that has happened to you at Wright State?
I think that probably being president of the faculty. Administratively, that's the most exciting. Absolutely, we were able to accomplish more, and I just got right into the middle of it and loved it. Unlike the other administrative posts that I had, doing other people's work and getting no credit. Teaching, I was really excited to be hired in, actually, as the specialist for the Romantic, but the 19th century as a whole.
Well, as I ask you what was the most exciting, what would have been one of the most discouraging, or one of your most down experiences?
Not being allowed to do my work that I've been hired to do, and that occurred particularly in the wing.
The work, what work were you hired to do?
Those 5 major, like the food service and the bookstore, and there were 5 of them anyway. It was somebody else trying to take over my job. And I finally wrote the person to whom I reported, that either you don't have to have a lot of knowledge about food service. If you have good people working for you, you'll learn from them. I didn't need anybody to come down and tell my people what to do when they were painting the Rathskeller, And it was a pure misery, if you want to know the truth about it. And I profited by the experience, but I just stayed in the wing 2 years. I had a wonderful excuse for going back, and that was another opportunity to write another book.
Oh, to go back to
my department.
Yeah.
And they have always been like a family to me. They welcomed me back, even when I got up and did the infamous speech, the lady in red. The department never condemned me for that.
Yeah.
Never. Now, I don't know if you want that kind of thing, but we're just talking turkey now.
Okay, tell me that. Tell me at least one of those, okay? Like the lady in red. I remember that.
Oh, the speech that, yes. Well, now, if you remember it, there's not too much for me to say. I knew, though. I knew. And this is what it's like to be a person of conscience. To be much too honest, really. My sister tells me, I said, Marjorie, I don't need another mother. But she's always, she's a lot older than I. But I knew when that faculty meeting came around, I had not spoken to anyone, to nobody, that I was going to get up there. Jake Dorn was the president then. I don't know now if I'm supposed to say these things or not, but I went by his office before the meeting. I always try to do things in proper order. And he said, now we're going to have somebody get up there and speak on behalf of the faculty if this thing's supposed to go through. Well, guess who got up and spoke on behalf of the faculty? And it went over swimmingly, 180 to 140 something. And afterwards, when I went by his office, he was a changed person. Now, you might have hurt somebody very much. I said, he's already hurt an entire university.
Well, yeah, you're referring in a sense to some of the struggles that went on.
The struggles, that's right.
Among the faculty.
That is right. The chart of that time, which I kept all of this, I might have some things you might really be interested in. It showed that every single area in the university reported to this gentleman, except for 2 staff members, and I don't think there was anybody that reported to him that had faculty experience. It was that bad at that point. If you believe as I do, see, I believe in quality. I believe in having the credentials. If you're supposed to have them, don't pretend that you have them, And but I think that the gentleman had a great deal of difficulty working with women, especially those who were qualified. So those were the worst of times. times, and there were some wonderfully great times. Almost nobody remembers the 20th anniversary. Do you remember it?
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful affair. The governor from Ohio came down.
Mm-hmm. I remember the tent.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Did you work ever very much with Dr. Mulholland?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was he a briar in your...
Was he what?
Was he a briar in your skin?
No, I got along quite well with him. You know.
He and I were just like that. And I think it's because we had trodden a lot of the same territory in Arkansas and Oklahoma and whatever.
That sign, does that mean you were close?
No.
You weren't close. Okay,
Right.
we don't need to go there. Okay.
No. There was something about me, obviously, that turned him off. And I think it probably had to do with, you know, the leadership kind of thing. And I don't make any bones about it. If I'm asked to do a job, I'll stay till midnight.
Oh.
I was up here many nights over in the wing till midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Computers were just, can you believe that, were just then coming in the 60s?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I may have that date wrong, but not everybody had a computer, and certainly not everybody had a cell phone that would take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Or would do little text, you know.
And we didn't have email then.
We didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
So you talked with people.
Well, I had Helen Cayley. Do you remember her?
Mm-hmm.
She was a remarkable woman. She protected me just like a mother. People would come in and quiz her, you know. See, politics can get very, very difficult. I'll just use that word. And I think it's a lot easier. I'll say that this is what I believe. I believe that you can be very discreet and yet not be deceitful or highly political in a negative way. You can always not tell the full truth, but you could not, that would be Emily Dickinson, wouldn't it? Tell it slant.
Well, you brought us up now pretty much to the present. What is your impression now of Wright State?
I think it's grown enormously. I think we have a very capable president now who seems to be very capable. I don't know much about the provost, but it seems you don't hear all of this, the struggle, as you called it.
Mm-hmm.
We had to struggle a lot those first years to come to an understanding. And I think it was probably absolutely necessary to go through that. I don't hear when I come to the campus, or I'm here anytime, I don't hear anything about that.
Okay, give me a one word that would describe Wright State now in your perception.
This is not the best word, but forward-looking, I think, would describe it.
Forward-looking.
Forward-looking.
Oh, that's great. Okay, is there anything special now that you would like to add to your interview? Something we haven't mentioned?
No, I would just like to express my appreciation for the pleasure that I've had, pleasure and pain, and the growth that I feel that I went through and have also seen in my colleagues. It's quite a different place now, quite a different place. And I'd really kind of like to get a little more close to it now, to be more involved, to see what really is going on. But I do think probably our current president is one of the best, I'll just put it, that we've had.
But you perceive that the university is successful at this point?
I do think it's succeeding, yes.
That's nice.
I do.
Well, I appreciate your remembrances, your candor, and your humor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
I'm
Dr.
honored that you
Harden.
would have me here. Thank you.
Yeah.